Uglies is Netflix's latest movie to be released on the platform, and considering its sci-fi dystopian edge that runs through the core of the story, it's got a message embedded within it that it tries to land that can be interpreted in many different ways. Whether that be the beauty standards that as a society we put upon ourselves and others, the controlling nature of higher powers and the destruction of the environment and the consequences that we may not necessarily face but future generations will. With this being quite short, at only 1 hour and 40 minutes, I do question whether the runtime acted like an anti-venom for the potency of the message that it wanted to land. So with that, let's take a look at this movie and break down all that there was to take away from it. Here is Uglies Ending Explained. Just to let you know, this video will contain spoilers. The Ending Explained. Tally was essentially the person that we witnessed this dystopian world through. The city was being run by somebody called Dr. Cable, and following the destruction of the world as we knew it several hundred years ago, a new reusable energy was able to be harvested from a flower called the White Tiger Orchid. This new world was built due to people being too reliant on fossil fuels, which ultimately meant that there was division amongst the people and war broke out, causing the city to burn. So the solution to this problem was for when citizens reached 16 years old, everybody would become pretty. I know, it's a very weird concept, but what this truly meant was that once everybody underwent surgery and became equal in terms of their physical appearance, there would be no need for conflict because everybody was just the same. What the surgery did though was it caused lesions to be formed on the brain and it dulled individuals' minds, essentially making them citizens which wouldn't be a threat and were able to be controlled, meaning that the threat of the city being burned to the ground again due to human behavior was non-existent because everybody was just a lot tamer and unable to think freely. Tally didn't truly know what she wanted in life. She didn't know if she wanted to undergo surgery and become pretty or if she wanted to side with the rebellion group called the Smoke. All she'd ever known and had to look forward to was leaving the dormitories and embarking on her life as a beautiful individual. But after seeing that there was another way of living, a way where as a person you could choose what you wanted to do, have your own thoughts, feelings, and live off of nature, a place where people didn't just see beauty in the physical sense, but for what was inside of a person, it made her question everything. She obviously went to the Smoke under the pretense that David was manipulating people into staying there and that they were building a weapon to destroy the city, when in reality that wasn't the case at all. Dr. Cable wanted to destroy the Smoke. The Smoke were actually working on a cure to the surgery that Dr. Cable was forcing everybody to get. The cure would ultimately remove the lesions and allow people to have free thought again, rather than the false sense of happiness that people believed that they had. Dr. Cable said, if you leave people to think, then they'll destroy the world. And based on what happened in the past, you can kind of see where she's coming from because all that she's basing her beliefs on is what happened with the Rusties several hundred years ago, which caused the world to enter a damaged state. So she was essentially acting in fear, but the way that she was going about carrying it out was extremely wrong. With Tally's pendant burning and triggering a tracking device within it, this led the scouts to the destination and for the rebellion's base to be destroyed whilst Croy, Shay and David's mother were taken as prisoners. With Tally and David eventually breaking them out, David's mother also managed to find the nanosynth, the missing part of what she needed to make the cure. Shay was forcefully turned into a pretty, which is the last thing that she would have ever wanted to happen. Yet, right in front of Tally, she was saying that she didn't want to be turned back to an ugly. With the cure not being tested, it was something that Tally was trying to get used on Shay. However, without Shay being able to consent to it because she was a mindless zombie, but a sentient human being nonetheless. If they'd gone through with it, it would have made them no better than Dr. Cable, so the moral dilemma was there. This ultimately led Tally to sacrifice herself as the guinea pig, but it meant that she had to undergo surgery and turn pretty in order to see if it would eventually work. She said to David that she'd leave a sign to show that she was still within there and that she wanted to be turned back to an ugly. This sign was the scar that she decided to keep on her hand. Right at the beginning of the movie, both Tally and Paris, her former best friend before he transformed, said that they'd keep their scars that they had on their hand, which symbolized their friendship because it meant a lot to them. However, Paris didn't. So with Tally keeping the scar, that was her sign to David for when he did return to use the serum on her and to see if she would be cured. The core theme in this movie is centered around beauty standards and how being pretty isn't necessarily the be-all and end-all of what makes a human being. The beautiful people in this movie were mindless and had a false sense of happiness and were pretty much just being controlled. We only saw true happiness when Tally was in the Smoke and people were living like how the Rusties were. In fact, even before that era. Within the smoke, there was a sense of true community, and human characteristics were what was present. David even called Tally beautiful when he gazed into her eyes because of what she was saying and how she was acting, as well as the way that she looked. I thought it was actually quite funny that at the time where Tally was considered pretty within the city, she was wearing a mask that had a snout and she looked like a pig, yet everybody loved it. I feel like that was definitely done deliberately. So the theme of this movie was one which was pretty much in our face for the most part of the runtime. My review of the film. Honestly, I thought this movie was just okay. It was a tad boring, and I feel like the runtime didn't give this story much room to play with. The message within the movie had the potential to be quite powerful, but I feel like it was just a bit two-dimensional, and it didn't really delve into the deeper themes that could have been present. It was all just very surface level, the tip of the iceberg. I even feel like the chemistry between the characters and the relationships that we saw forming weren't that convincing. Whether that be Tally and Paris, Tally and David, and even Tally and Shay, it was all just a bit rushed and like there wasn't the time and attention given to establishing the care between them. So when Tally sacrificed herself at the end, I didn't really feel the weight behind it. In terms of the visuals, I feel like it was a bit of a mixed bag. Some things looked okay, but at the same time, there were moments where the CGI just felt a bit poor and like it was done on the cheap. I feel like this movie would have probably worked better if it was like a Black Mirror episode, similar vibes to Nosedive maybe, but it was done in a completely different fashion. One element of the film that I thought was good were the song choices that were playing underneath the scenes. Each song suited the mood so well, and whilst it didn't really evoke emotion, it complemented the scene. In terms of the performances, I thought they were all pretty strong. Tally pretty much carried this film, and whilst there were no standout performances because the writing was just pretty tame, the acting was just consistent across the board. I'd probably describe this movie as one that I won't really remember unless I stumble across it again. Something that is a shame because there was definitely potential there. I've not read the book before, but for it to get adapted, I would imagine that the story was really strong in the form of text. But it just feels like this has fallen victim to Netflix just wanting to acquire an IP, get there first, and not necessarily give it the scope to feel grand or the potency and the message that you're supposed to walk away with. If you spend your time watching this film, I don't think it'll be a complete waste of time because there are enjoyable parts to it, but if you decide not to watch it, then I don't think you're missing much at all. Compared to last week's release, Rebel Ridge, this one is nowhere near as good as that, so if you're debating between the two, I think you should go with Rebel Ridge. So, there you have it, Uglies Ending Explained. If you want to see more of your favourite TV shows and movies broken down, then click on the card in the top corner, or alternatively you can head over to my channel where you'll find them all. And finally, if you'd like to see what I rated this movie out of 5 stars, then head over to my Letterboxd profile. It's where I rate the latest releases in real time, stuff that I don't even cover on the channel. What did you think of this movie? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. As always, thanks for tuning into the video and I'll see you in the next one.